Welcome to the North Group podcast. At North Group, we are invited into organizations to influence leadership and organizational behavior. It is absolutely fascinating work. Today, we invite you into one of those conversations.
Welcome to the North Group podcast. My name is Jerry Murray, and I am joined by friends Leron Lehman and Brian Black, and I am looking forward to today's conversation. Several years ago, and maybe even currently, the Discovery Channel had a television program called Mythbusters. And this is when two experts would come together and they would discuss whether something was true or urban legend. And to some extent, we're going to do that today. And the topic is going to be family business and whether the outlook for family businesses individually is dismal or if it's fantastic. We've all seen the statistics that suggest that family businesses have a rough time moving from generation to generation. Over less than half family businesses move from generation 1 to 2, and when you move all the way to generation 4, less than 5%. And I want to know if that should affect the outlook of business owning families should have about their future. And so the question is, are we going to call bull on that statistic, or are we going to acknowledge its truth? Leron, are we calling bull on that?
Mostly bull.
Mostly bull.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about it. I think context matters a lot.
Yeah.
So, it's political season now. There's ads on TV all the time. Most of them are mostly false, maybe, but there's some truth in them as well. And that's sort of the case here. They're based in reality. And we've all heard the stories and the anecdotes, maybe witnessed firsthand some messy family business situations. But in reality, if you dig deeper, and this is where the context comes in, I think, business is just hard, family business or otherwise. And statistically speaking, family business actually have some advantages. So if you look at various measures, think of culture, there's some research that suggests family businesses have stronger culture. Yeah. I made a couple of other notes from some things that I've read. A Price Waterhouse survey says 74% of family businesses have stronger cultures. When we think about longevity, average tenure on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, 20 years.
Okay.
So now that doesn't necessarily mean they went out of business, but that's a big change. Whether they were merged, some of them went out of business. S&P 500, in 1965, it was 32 years. If you expand that to 2020, 21 years is the average tenure of a company in the S&P 500. So there's natural business cycles. Companies rise, companies fall, companies grow, companies go out of business. And that's just generally true. It's true with family businesses as well. So family businesses stack up generally favorably against the total population of businesses, but they're not immune from challenges, but they're certainly in a worse situation than others. So I would say largely false.
Yeah. Thanks, Leron. Brian, you agree with Leron? Are you calling bull on this?
Oh, I'm calling bull.
Yeah.
With him 100% for every reason he said.
Yeah.
And the family business, and we believe this at North Group, is really a gift to the world, to the community, not just to its team, but its customers. And there's all kinds of data to support that. So, I'll call bull and say there's lots of hope. If families really desire longevity and think about it from the beginning as a valuable goal.
Brian, why do you think the statistics suggest such a gloomy picture?
Well, Leron said it first. Family business is hard in general, but there's some realities that families face as they move generationally. Some are internal, some are external. I mean, externally for any business, there's marketplace change, and we've seen businesses that were highly relevant and over generations, not through any fault of an internal problem, but the fact that the world has moved past what the business, so that exists. That's one reason I think that you'll see some fade over generations. I think another thing that you have as you move generationally and you think about what makes it challenging, right, to go generationally is that when we start generationally, we think of generation 1, right? Leron is often the founding generation. It's the founding generation. And that founding generation is typically installing a next generation that they raised, oftentimes raised in their home. So those first two generations have this very intact, same family system. We're in this together. I grew up watching it happen.
Yeah.
But as you start to move out to the next generation, third generation, most of the time, not always, most of the time what you wind up with is a generation that's starting to spread out. You've got cousins involved who weren't raised in the same home and find their way, more spread away from the business. So I think just the nature of family systems and how values can change over generations put a few headwinds into the mix for families, but with lots of hope if we pay attention to what's required to overcome the headwinds.
Yeah. Leron, on the other side, would you say with intentionality and smart succession planning, a family business could last forever?
For sure. It's a reasonable goal. It's not always a given that things can last forever. Some things have a time and a place and a season, and it just naturally ends. But for many businesses, forever is a reasonable thing to expect. It takes a lot of intentionality. I think in the work that we do, both in general here at North Group, but specifically with families and in transition and succession planning, it's axiomatic that it just takes intention and hard work. Like anything else in life, relationships, a marriage, a friendship, a business, organizational health, family business, it takes a lot of intentionality. Most things in the world and in nature just want to erode or decay or be mediocre. There's laws of this, laws of thermodynamics. There's entropy. Everything decays over time. Family businesses are no exception. Without constant maintenance, care, and feeding, things just decay. So if you're intentional about it and you're explicit and you know what you want and you work towards it and you communicate well, there's no reason that family businesses can't last through the generations and in some cases in perpetuity.
So when you think about intentionality with succession in a family business, it sounds like hard work, right? If we're naturally going to come down to the mean, this sounds like hard work. For a family business owner, describe what some of the steps are, some of the process for succession in a family business. And Brian, I'm going to ask you this question too.
Great,
so,
go.
First, I'll say there's no formula. And so I think sometimes even when we talk about it, I think we're quick to say it's a process. There's no one size fits all. Every situation, every family, every business is unique. And that's absolutely true. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of moving parts. But there are some key themes and some key elements. And some of these start at the family level, maybe even precede the business. So, for example, a family system of how did we grow up? How do we relate to each other? What are the habits and the culture and the values that we've developed and adopted? Maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly. These all have an impact. And so acknowledging those things, maybe being intentional about changing or having some of those evolve, but acknowledging this is who we are, this is how we relate, this is how we think, communicate, make decisions. That's a big part of it. Let's not pretend that these things don't have an impact. They have a huge impact. So that'll be part of it. And then other than that, communication. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what is it we want to do. Let's recognize that our generation as a founding generation had a much different experience. It's a much different environment, a different economy. The business is probably much larger now than it was when we were coming up. And so our experience is not representative of our children or of the next generation's experience. And so that's part of communication, acknowledging that, being honest and candid with each other, but also understanding. So that would be foundational and important to facilitating this. There's obviously a lot more than that, but I think that's a really great starting point to acknowledge and recognize those things.
Yeah, that's great. Brian, other thoughts on that question from a business owning family's perspective? How might they experience a process of succession?
Yeah, and I would acknowledge, I think we all see that we encounter family business owners in different seasons of their journey. In the perfect world, right, we encounter folks early on their journey. And if we encounter people early on their journey and they're thinking far ahead, we're talking about the word preparedness. How do we prepare? And the first thing, and Leron said it well, I think we'd say, hey, be a family first. In simple English, like if you have the ability to set the table early, be a family first, and let the business be something you can invite people into and not make it the playground or the place where your whole family works out their life together. I think that's one early foundation. The second is to think about building a business that you'd want to invite the next generations into. So oftentimes we get after things in the way we know to do it, and we mix up the roles of owner and leader, and we just go and do what we have to do, which is a great way to start a business and how most of us start. But at some point, when you really think about generational work, we think about how do we prepare this business so that we can actually invite talented next-gen family members into this space. That begins as early as you can possibly start. But even if we encounter folks later, and we often do, how about it, Leron? We'll encounter folks that are really well into their own journey and haven't given as much intention and thought, other than maybe a little bit of pondering, to how this business functions and how to invite the next gen in or prepare it for the next gen. So our process with a family would engage them where they're at, would recognize the season, and then say, how do we get the family in the conversations at the season they're in they need to be to have the clarity they need? How do we engage in the business to help the business prepare for what it needs? And how do we and can we bring the two together? But in each season, it's going to look a little different, right? And the closer we get and the older the generations push sometimes, the faster or the harder or maybe sometimes the more difficult it gets to undo things that we wish we could have tackled early along. But there's always hope, even in a late season.
Yeah. Thank you. So much there. We talked about just the family, who they are, where they're coming from. We talked about the business and, honoring the business. And then how do we bring them back together and extend invitations at the right time? At the root of that, and just at the personal experience, is the relationship you have with others in your family. And there are so many dynamics going on relationally in family businesses. What is just some general advice you would have for family members that wish to have the very best possible relationships they could have with family members in and outside their business, but with that dynamic present? Leron, what do you think about that one?
An analogy comes to mind. Brian and I have had some conversations recently about health and longevity. And this is pretty common knowledge if you watch videos on YouTube or read health blogs or read some books about current things that are going on. And it's really pretty simple. We have this sophistication bias. We want all these fancy diets and supplements and this and that and the other thing. But in reality, we all know what it takes to live a long and healthy life. It's to eat healthy, be active, and have some good relationships. Now, maybe I'm oversimplifying that slightly, but that's basically it. Everybody knows this, and yet so few of us practice it. And it's much the same with family businesses and relationships. We kind of all know what it means to have a good relationship, to build trust, to treat each other with respect, to be kind, to say what we really think, to compliment each other. Like, this isn't hard stuff to understand. It is often very difficult to put into practice, though. And so, I think often in this work, it does feel like we have to come with complex solutions because these are complicated problems. And sometimes there are real complexities that are hard to wrestle with. But most of it can be boiled down to pretty simple things. Treat each other well, respect each other, tell the truth, build trust. And those are the building blocks of relationships, which are the building blocks of strong families, which are the building blocks of great family businesses. So there's not a lot of mystery to some of the basics.
I love that. There's a freedom from unrealistic expectations, but there's also a freedom to live out the basic expectations of just human dynamics. Brian, how about you on that question?
Yeah, I love what Leron said. Harvard Business Review has a model they've put out years ago, which is a 4-room model. Imagine a house model, and I like this model for families to think about how do we maintain healthy relationships. The 4-room model has a house showing 4 rooms, of course. The largest room runs along the whole side of the house. It's the family room, and it's the largest room. And then from that room, there are doors entering to 3 other rooms. The bottom room is employment or management. The middle room is governance, and the top room is ownership. And so from the family room, this is where you begin everything. You begin nurturing the family. It's a room characterized by love and care and candor and clarity and all those things. And you make it clear that each of these rooms, we bear a different role and responsibility and a different posture. And I think in a family business, getting really clear, how do I enter each of these rooms from the family? Can I walk right into the employment room? What are the terms under which I could? How could I become an owner? Getting really clear on that together and then being for each other inside of that, and being careful to do it in a way that respects the business, respects the entity, and cares for the skills of the family. I think that is how healthy business families grow. And they know what room they're in when they're in them, and they know when they're not in that room and they're not in them.
That makes so much sense. Brian, you and Leron, you've been walking with family businesses for years. You have seen succession happen effectively. You've, I'm sure, learned a lot through the process and shared quite a bit. Could you, Brian, describe the steps that you take as a consultant to walking alongside family businesses and how you help see them through a succession process?
And I think we'll share this answer. I'll start and let Leron clean it up. You know, we all know that when we enter into a relationship with a client, a family, the starting point for us is to get them to know them deeply, to get to know their present location. We would call it an assessment. Often it's an organizational assessment, but it also involves a family component. Those are confidential conversations held with family members, other team members, to deeply understand what is presently true. What's true? What's your current location? And that's not just what isn't right, but what's wonderful. What do we not want to lose? What are the things that drive us that we value? And what are those things that we wish were better or different? And just that process alone, I think you'd agree with me on this, Leron. This might be the first time someone has told their true story to someone outside of their family. And just sitting next to someone and you know their truth and they know you know and they've placed the trust in you is a really strong starting point in our process. We wouldn't move forward with any family without being really clear with them. Are we with you in your current location? So that's always entry level one. I'll add one more, and then maybe Leron wants to pick up the rest. The second thing, from there, we will say, you know, if they've come saying, we want to figure out how to transition this business to the next generation, this is our goal, this is our heart. You know, we that assessment is responsive then to, okay, if that's what you desire, that's your desired location, your present location has these things true in it, how do we walk with you in hope to get from your current location to your desired location? Often it's possible, but it's going to take some good work. And so we would enter in then to an engagement or relationship with the family, and almost always the family and the business, because of course, remember, multiple hats. And through a series of gates that we'd walk through, conversations, gathering the right people, talking about the right things, we begin to move them toward that desired location. Sometimes very incrementally, because a lot of change can be very incremental, and sometimes just by bringing enough clarity that the light bulb goes on and we've made a big leap just by bringing clarity to the family. You want to clean that up?
I'll add a couple of things. There are some instances where I think we're pretty clear on the current location. There's not a lot of clarity on the desired location. Maybe the family doesn't, they sort of know what they want, but they don't think it's realistic, so it's hard to verbalize. Or perhaps they haven't really allowed themselves to dream, or there's been some disappointments, and they're just not quite in a position to really declare, this is where we think we want to head to. So in that case, there's a bit more discovery to figure out what is that desired future state. Based on what we've understood about your values, how you think about things, what are some of the options and what might make sense for you? And then it starts to become clear, all right, to get from here to there, there's some things to work on, some areas to develop, maybe develop the next generation, maybe fix some things in the business with organizational health. Maybe, you know, Brian talked about this model from HBR or Harvard Business School with some of the family rooms and other rooms. Maybe introduce some of these things to provide better governance or define what ownership looks like. So it really depends on what does the family need, what does the business need, and then what tools or frameworks or ways of thinking can we introduce to help get there. They're all different, but there's some similarities. So in terms of ownership, what are the roles? Who are those people? Leadership, what are the roles? Who are those people? Are there some things that need to be implemented there? Is there some development that needs to happen? There's a number of then underlying technical issues that we would often quarterback or orchestrate, but convene a team to assist with. So there are legal issues and documentation issues and tax planning issues and valuation issues and other structural issues. Those are typically a little bit in the background as we start, but eventually we need to figure those things out. And we would typically work with a team of other advisors to pull some of those things together once we have clarity on what are we trying to accomplish here, what's our timeline, who's who. So those are some of the key elements, but there's a lot of other details in there that just depend on facts and circumstances.
I would add something too, and to those that are listening to this, to normalize something for family business owners that might be tuning in here. We work with business owners who are very used to accomplishing what they want to accomplish in life. They've built their business, and if they want to go after something, they figure a way to do it, very tenacious and determined and mission-driven in their business. Mm-hmm. But when they get to succession planning and they think about, how do we figure this out? How do I engage my adult children or my young children, or how do I engage my cousins? A lot of times we'll find business owners who can make things move easily in their business, find themselves somewhat stuck in this arena. And as a line that, I've probably used too much, but the reality is we'll say that doers do, but when they don't know what to do, they don't. And so really understanding, if you're a business owner in a family business and it feels like, I know I need to do something, I'm not sure what to do, that's a really normal experience. I think one of the most wonderful opportunities we have is to sit with really competent, mission-driven, values-driven families who are a little bit stuck on how to move forward, and to help, as Leron pointed out, pave or point them on a helpful path and walk with them in that direction and get them unstuck. It's a great place to be with people who have goals. There's things they want to accomplish. They know why they exist. They just don't know how to move.
It would seem to me that has to be received from these business owners as a gift to them, who love to find solutions, but to each family member who's able to tell their story in a new way, and for that information to be collected and then processed with the technical elements of succession planning that would all seem just out of reach to someone who knows we need to do something but isn't quite sure what. Well, hey, we have a few distinctives in how we go about the work we do. And one of them, in fact, it's my favorite core value, is that we wish to instill hope. And I'd be interested in any, examples or ways that you find yourself, while in these conversations, able to instill some hope in one of these business owners or family members, that they're just not sure where this is taking us, but they hope so much that we'll be able to get to a great place. Brian, how do you instill hope?
Well, I would say many of us enter into difficult conversations, or the thought of them, with this belief that is not true, which is we have this false belief that we can't speak the truth and maintain the relationship at the same time. And so we kind of default to, I've just got to hold this. I can't go there. And so one of the most wonderful ways of instilling hope is to create an environment. And that's what we work at. We will identify, hey, we really do need to talk about this, whether it's your son's performance in the business, or it's maybe the relationship of two current owners, and maybe it's not what it needs to be, or we're not meeting each other's expectations and how we're performing. All these different things. You can think of a long list of these things. And the ability to say, not only can we identify them as the things we need to talk about, but we're going to get in the room and create an environment where it's safe. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's safe to have this conversation, because we're going to declare as we go into it that we are for each other in this. And as much as we can, we do share a common purpose. I think what really instills hope is when you can sit with people who feel a little bit at odds with something and not sure, and you can declare a common purpose that they actually have. And you can create the environment where they can have the conversations and ultimately declare that they are for each other. I don't know anything that's more hopeful than watching those conversations unfold, getting to the other side and talk about Colin Bull on the myth that I can't speak the truth and maintain the relationship. The opposite's true. I can speak the truth, and done well, it will build our relationship.
Yeah, Brian, that is rich, and it's unique, and it makes a huge difference. I know. I know it does. Hey, start with you, but for both of you, finally, as we start to wrap up here, what is one surprise blessing that a family member might experience during a succession planning process that they wouldn't otherwise expect? Can you think of something?
One comes to mind in many family businesses, especially ones where multiple family members, maybe multiple generations, and there's a lot of family activity, and many, but not all, of the key leadership roles are held by family. I think it's easy for these families to differentiate between themselves and their other key employees and employees at large. Not that they don't appreciate them, but there's somewhat of a different way of thinking about it. And yet, these employees, they're aware of what's going on. They have questions. They wonder, where are we going? They wonder, is the next generation ready? Sure. And in many cases, they want to be part of the solution. They want to support. And when they're brought in and when they see good planning is being done and these things are communicated out, I think it can be a surprise that, oh, wow, we were thinking about this in terms of the family. But look, these other folks are rooting for us as well. They want to support us. They want to come alongside. And I think it's refreshing, helpful, and encouraging, and can be a surprise that, oh, they were really wondering about this all along.
Right.
Maybe we should have been more proactive or been more communicative, because this feels really great to have such a group of people rooting for us.
It's not just good for us, it's good for everyone.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian?
I really like that answer. I'll pile on very lightly. So oftentimes along the journey in a family or in a business or the intersection of both, oftentimes we sometimes retreat into ourselves. You know, we all are human beings that will protect ourselves and maybe avoid, being fully known. And my experience with families in a business process like this is when you get an environment where trust is built, real conversations are held, I think a surprise blessing is that you in a sense kind of come out into your true self. Really, if we do this well, people begin to be able to express their true selves, what their real wishes are, what their real desires are, and we can recognize that we can find our way inside of that in a way that I never had hoped. To me, that's a surprise to see someone wake up to themselves in some ways, because they've kind of learned, like, this is how I have to function inside this system to be okay. But now there's an opportunity to function this way. That would be a surprise blessing.
That is, when people can be their true selves, they can be their best selves. And when they're their best selves, their organization, their family are going to be blessed by that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this is about all we have time for today. Thank you, Leron. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for sharing your expertise on this topic. Thank you even more for your sincere care for businesses, for strong businesses, and for strong families, and how the combination is just making our community better.